So, for our audience, I met Phil while doing Good Gym. So, Phil's a keen runner. Would you like to say a bit more about yourself?
Yes, I'm a runner, but not necessarily a keen runner. I've lived on the outskirts of London most of my life, so I was brought up in Kent, London borders at the time, and now I'm in Barnet borders. So I've always had the countryside nearby, and I'm one of seven kids, and we were brought in the country. So running was always there, whether that's football or being chased or whatever. So running's always been part of my DNA, but it's more a question of I run for a purpose rather than run for just running. So I enjoy the experience of running and I can get things done, but I like to have achieved something at the end of it rather than just sweat and the time.
So, I know that you do a website with runs around London. Could you tell me a bit about how you came to do that?
Well, that's an interesting story. So I think a little bit more about the background. I started off as an engineer at British Aerospace making aircraft, and then got into IT business systems. But there's always been this thing to say that how do you change from going from a corporate life into a real life is something that you want to do. So I've had a I've had a passion that I need to do something more creative, and so it was back probably about 15 years ago that I managed to find a Nikon F4 at an auction with all the lenses. And I thought, well, it's a good thing to just learn about photography. And I thought the best way to not just buy things and put in the cupboard is to do something solid. So I took up a degree. I thought I'd just do a degree in photography. That's straightforward. But there's a big problem in terms of how a creative thinks and how an engineer thinks. It's almost completely different. And so they used to give you sort of questions like, do a photo assignment on contrast, rough v smooth, tall v thin. And I thought, what's the formula for that? What's the right answer? And because I needed to create that, I thought I'd go into London and use that as my canvas. And I quickly discovered I didn't know very much about London and I didn't know very much about photography. But I enjoyed the experience and I thought, well, I better go and map where I can go back to. So I did quite a few exercises initially and just trying to find my way around London and finding out the best places to take photographs and what that routes were so I can go back to it depending on what the other assignments were. And that gradually built up in time. I was originally looking at sort of different places to find out, what's the best angle to take photographs for composition. And it's really grown from there, from being as a something that I can just go to London to photograph, but to a set of routes. And originally we're just in a small part of London, the main areas of London's the entertainment area, the sightseeing area, and the shopping areas in the City of London. But then I started, as it progressed, and you sort of put your ideas out to people. People were saying, yeah, that's very good. One thing we don't know very much is we don't know very much about where to run in London. So I thought, okay, well, I'll start doing that. So I started using them more as running. And when I was doing them, I found I used to go down to London early in the morning, normally on a Sunday, because then I had London to myself from about 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock with hardly anyone there. And I could cover a lot if I ran it. And it also keeps you focused. If you've ever done any exploring, and running and exploring, you do a run for the first time, your senses are much more heightened when you have to look around and find your way around. And running London gave you that, but it also it's a great tool for a photographer because what you're doing is your eye is picking out the things that are of interest. And because I'm not a fantastic runner, it also gave you great excuses to stop. So that's what it came down to. For the running side of it, I did this across London visual marathon, which is in 14 different parts. Each part's between about 2 to 5 kilometres long, but it means you can do it in little stages. And I found that was a fantastic way of doing it. And maybe explore, but gave me enough information to put into one place. And it's just grown from there. I think the other part of that is that once you've got that, you realise that it's nice to share things, and that's why I put it onto a website. The other area that I thought was important when I was doing this, because I come from a sort of engineering and a IT background, was how do you communicate a city? how it's not just running it, you have to tell people about the city. So, what's the most visually exciting route? What can you see along the way? What is that? What is that house or building or river? Why was it there? And then it forced you down into look at the history of it. So I tended to look at two periods of history. The first one would have been the Tudor times, which you could do very much in the City of London and a bit in the West End. And then the other one was Victorian times, which you could do across. Two very exciting areas of London in terms of its development. And I basically acquired lots of information about the run and lots of information about the contents within it. And it has been a process of how do you take that content, put it into something that someone can run, but also get the information as they go along and improve their photography. So I sort of made it more difficult for myself, but it's not just a run, it's a guide to that part of London by running.
And what would your advice be, and kind of what challenges have you sort of faced sort of setting this up as a business?
I think the main thing to do when you're setting up a business, especially if you work in corporate, is something to I would recommend everyone try to do it at some point in their lives, because what it allows you to do is you tend to see the world differently, and you get a lot of skills from that process which you can apply back into work or into other aspects of your life. So it is a growing phase. I think it's a lot longer than you think. You also realize that there's a lot of skills that you haven't got that you need to acquire. So I would say that you shouldn't think of it saying, oh, I'll just do it for this year, or do this by the end of the year I've set up a business and I'll be working lots of money. I think it's a long term, but you use it like an education. It's almost like going back to school. You have to learn the subjects and you have to apply them, and then they will deliver. I think the challenges are that, especially in today's area, although there's a lot of free things on there, the quality that you have to get to just be able to be in the game is a lot higher than you think. You have to be able to, I wouldn't say the word fail, but it's almost like you have to be able to get used to delayed success. So you try something, it doesn't quite work, you say, okay, I'll have to go back and do that. So you've been able to process and evaluate feedback is a very useful skill, but it does teach you an awful lot. You sometimes don't always know it at a time. It's a bit like climbing a mountain. It's a long way up and there's a lot of hard slogs, but often you can stop and look at how far you've come, and sometimes the mist clears and you get these wonderful views. Other times the rain comes down and it's not too good, but it is a long process. But just don't give up, but also don't shoot too much for the stars. Just not initially anyway. Have that as a long-term focus, but make sure you've just got small wins that you can keep it going, and don't give up, and eventually you'll get there. It's also a fantastic way of just being able to try to put yourself in the shoes of someone else, maybe like your customer or what the problem is, and that process is sometimes harder if you're in a position where you're used, you've got your steady job, you've got you know what you're doing, and people think you're fantastic in that job. Try and do something completely different, which is sort of like vertically integrated, and being able to live in both those sets of shoes is important, because sometimes that's you learn and you grow more when you are outside your comfort zone. And just do that and try to do things together, and if it works, make it into a business. If it doesn't, make it into a hobby. But whatever happens, you'll find something to learn from it. And London's a great place to do that. It's got so much you can learn and live for.
So you've talked a little about the process of starting a business. So what organisations have you been to help with building your business?
So originally this started as a hobby, and as I started to collect it over the last 15 years, I thought, well, there is something for a business. So I've started initially to construct it in a way and feed it out to people to get their the views. And once that was there, I thought, well, I now need to go and look at it from a business perspective. And there's been several groups that I've looked at. The more recent ones, I think, which is useful to know, is there is something called Grow London Local, and it's really about trying to connect businesses with people who are professional in business who want to help, because they've all been through it before. They know how difficult starting up in business is. And it's a group that's run by the London Partnership, the Greater London Assembly, and through groups in there. So they've helped fund that, and they provide like business managers that you can go to, and they will help you to say, well, what's the best resources to use. And they've put me on to a couple of people. One which was they had a marketing guy who looked at what I was doing and gave us some pinpoint about how to change it in one or two ways to make it more focused. But they also took me to this other group which is called Digital Boost. Now they're a sort of a group which sort of puts the technology of some of the things like social media and marketing and business strategies together with people who want to help out, with mentors to help you structure your business in a way so that you can move at the pace of where you are. And it's a really helpful one because they also provide basics of what are the main elements of a business that you need to think about. So you can start small, but then you can actually start to use the mentors to grow forward. The main difference between the two is where I think Digital Boost is about meeting a larger group of people, looking at specific areas, whereas Grow London Local is more for setting up small communities where you can meet to sort of help each other. And I've helped a couple of groups in my group in Barnet, which is nearby the Potter's Pantry. We meet there and we talk about it, issues around it, and that's really quite helpful. The other groups I think I've found that the British Library is a fantastic place to get research. They sometimes do things about copyright and great for research. And the other one which I've started to use is the Federation of Small Businesses, which also have a meet-up areas. But there's a lot out there, and there's what I'm really pleased with is that there's a lot of people going on the same journey, but more importantly, there's a lot of people who want to help you.
You've talked about London in different periods, so what's like the most interesting part for you of London, like historically speaking?
I think my favourite one is Shadwell Dock and the Prospect of Witney, which is the pub with the noose which hangs on the just on the riverbed, which is very near Execution Dock. It's part of Wapping. It's got a lot of history in there. City of London, I like all the small little streets inside London around Cornhills. There's lots of little alleyways, and to pull that together. In between that is the Inns of Courts, which you can walk around. It's a very historic, but it's also a little haven of things that you didn't really know about London, little areas of London you don't know.
Could you tell me a bit about your favourite place in London?
So my favourite place in London, I would have to say, would be Covent Garden. I say that for two reasons. One is it's also the place where my favourite king comes from, which is King Charles II, the king who brought back partying. And you have to think of Covent Garden as starting around about 1690. Now, King Charles II, just a little bit of context about him. He was a Stuart king, so this is when England had just become Scotland, England and Wales. His father had his head cut off, Charles I. We'd just had the period of Oliver Cromwell in charge. They didn't like him because he stopped Christmas and all the pubs and the drinking, so they brought Charles II back as the king to bring back partying. Now, when he first started, there was two events that happened. So he'd only been king for a few years, and in 1665 you had the Great Plague, and that killed 15% of the London's population, massive. And then in 1666, you might remember, Fire of London, that destroyed 70% of the city. And so Covent Garden at that point was just a garden. It was before the Reformation a place that used to make food for the Palace of Westminster and the Abbey. But there was a 3 mile exclusion zone around London to stop the plague and other things. And because there was no land around, they started to build on Covent Garden. And Covent Garden was built majestically. It had a piazza from the Italians. It had Indigo Jones designing it. It was built around lovely places for the aristocracy to live. But he also put in there, he established the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, the Royal Opera House, and obviously lots of markets and places to eat and drink. So that whole sort of area started to boom, and you can still see that today. That's one of the things I love about Covent Garden. All that history is there. The layout of it was in 1669 is still the layout it is today. It has a long history of being the first place for the Bow Street runners when they were starting there. And it spoiled the whole of the entertainment industry from St Giles just to the north to Leicester Square a bit further down to also Soho. So he built this entertainment route which basically went from the city all the way to his palace in Westminster and also St James. And the other thing that I like about that area, it was the first area where tea came in because his wife brought tea to England, and that's where. So that's my connection to it.
So you started up, but then you kind of done a bit of a rebrand, and you have like a new site now. So what's the idea behind the new site?
Well, this is always the problem if when you start up a business if you think you're going to start a business, is because one of the first things people say is that you have to niche. So you say, okay, well, I was broad, so I'll niche it down to running, and then you put that forward, and people say, "Oh, that's quite good, but I don't run. That means I can't use it." No, you can use it. You can walk it. You can do it in a particular way. So I think I had a bit of problem with it. The things that I was doing were useful to a wide range of people and a wide range of needs, but people were put off by the phrase "photo runs." So that was one of the things that I.
So any other changes apart from changes in the name of the website?
People have changed. People are not necessarily the same. Don't read it like a book anymore. They need things instantly. There's a different way of thinking and reacting. And so I've made it a lot more general. I've increased the way that people want to maybe select to run. So you don't necessarily select to have it in the City of London or the West End. You just say, well, I'm in this station, what are the runs around me? So I've basically taken all the information and moved it around, put across a search view, made it look as if I'm not 65, that this is a bit more younger look and feel to it. And the other thing I've put in there, and it's the area that I want to expand into a bit more, is I've added a lot more photographs and galleries. Now, when I first started, the first sort of seeds of this idea were about finding places to go in London where you could take photographs and give people a lot of ideas. And as part of the testing process, I set up a meetup group where I thought I'd just get people in and show them a route around London and tell them history as if I was their guide. But the thing I found about the group is that they wanted to be able to take good photographs, and they needed to take photographs of what they were seeing, but also of themselves. And this idea about being able to find a place in London that is good for you to take a photograph of what's around you and yourselves for your own experience, for social, became quite important. So a knock-on consequence of that group was that I'm starting to look at something what is called photo gyms, but not like a good gym particularly. You know, when you go to a gym, you have to do a warm-up, then you do a set of exercises, then you do a cool-down. This one is almost like finding a place to London where people can just check the cameras working, do all the main compositions that they can see around them, and then do a particular exercise, which may be landscape, it may be portraits, and then you look at their photographs at the end to help them cool down and do the editing so they can share them, and using the routes as a vehicle around it. So I do want to bring a bit more of the photography into the routes themselves, and I think the striding cities should work, but I think the process is that you can do it for any city. I'm just doing it for London for the moment.
When you say bring in photography, you're kind of looking maybe at bringing in some of the stuff from your course, like the contrast stuff and shapes and things like this.
Yes, I think you can do a lot of photography in London, or most of the photography you need to, especially in around London, with your iPhone or whatever. I mean, I know the iPhone more, but the way that people used to take photographs or paintings, you looked at the composition, or you looked at the style that you wanted to go to, and although the cameras can do a lot of the work for you, that knowledge and that sort of benchmark to be able to go and try it is not so regularly accessible. So if you were going to take a photograph of a particular area of London, you can look at it conventionally. You need to be able to look at it from the composition, so rules of thirds or negative space or frame within a frame. There's all these techniques which you can see but people don't know, but they produce good photographs. So when you look at different styles such as black and white, or you're looking at shapes or contrasts, what you're trying to do there is to engage an emotion from you, because often those ones you can't see them straight off. They're not obvious that thing is in black and white and what it's trying to say. And those ones, what they do is they force your eye to start to look at it in a bit more detail, to get that deeper emotion. Now you may have a pattern in there which is a calming influence, or you may have a black and white one that your brain is trying to work out the colours, or understanding that difference between the dark and the light to make a connection with you. And that's really what a photography is about, is forming an image which forms a connection to you. And look at style, and then try to look at going around London in different times of the day to look at that style. So when I did my degree in photography, it was quite interesting when they looked at style, because you had to follow a particular photographer and then see how they did that and then try to emulate that style. But you can do that very easy in London, but you need to get to the point where you're there. So if you want to do shapes or black and white, you do need to have tried it to see what works. And there's, let's say, the tools on the camera today really help accelerate that, but the learning is not there, which is why I'm thinking of the photo gyms to make that process better.
So I know a bit about the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is about, you kind of use squares to sort of fit things in on a
Agreed. This is really quite interesting, because it's very much, when people talk about these terms, it's just the way you see things. It's just the way you draw the eye. And the easiest way of describing that, even when we're sitting here, is if I move to one side of the frame that you can see, I'm really putting it in a section. If I put it in the middle, if we're in the middle of a frame, your eye when it looks at that, it looks for symmetry. So when you put a picture in the middle, if it's slightly off center, it creates tension. Your eye's not seeing it the way you want it to. When you put it a third, it looks at the picture and then draws you to that particular image. And it's a very interesting thing to do if you watch any television, for example. You'll see when they frame the video, they put the people where they want to, and then they move to the next person, and they're also in that next phase. So it's a very subtle way. It's also, the background is hugely important to be able to make it so it doesn't distract. So as I'm sitting here, I've got a picture coming out of this part of my head, but you'd want to be able to just isolate them on there, and a lot of the things on negative space and are all about just isolating the picture so you can just focus on what's in front of you. It's a little bit different from video, but the whole process is, when you look at a picture, you need to be able to take your eye to it, and it needs to be able to form either an emotion or it helps you with a story of information to keep it there. And composition techniques are all about just doing that. And if you're out in London and you want to take a photograph, you want it to pop out so that when somebody looks at it, they're getting an emotional response, and all of those are techniques you do it. If you just look at with your eyes, there's a way of looking at the way we see. We ignore 99.9% of everything we see. The brain doesn't look at it, but we're looking at things which will either, I think it's food, flight, fun, and all those sort of things will focus you. But your eye looks at it like a massive telephoto lens to just focus in the thing that it wants to. And all it's doing is it's focusing in, and that's really that picture that you get from that very focused thing of your eyes is what you want to put in the picture, produces that interest that you originally saw in the first place. That's the general things that composition is about. And when you look at shapes and different colours and black and white, it's forming an emotion inside you. The reason why we look at black and white rather than colour is because when we look at a black and white photograph, your mind's saying, oh, what colour is that? So it stays on that picture a bit more. If you do a shape and its symmetry, it's pleasing to the eye because that's what it needs to do. But you can also do it the other way around. You can produce tension. You can produce something which is very much in social documentary, where they produce something that looks calm, but in one part of it there's something which is saying, oh no, there's someone throwing a brick here, and that starts to tell a story.
Talk about frame within a frame within photography. So what is that exactly?
Frame within a frame is the easiest thing to look at this is if you're looking at an arch and you've got a subject behind that. You take a bit of the arch and you've got the photograph you're taking is within inside that arch, and that's a frame within inside the frame which is actually physical itself. And there's another way of focusing the eye. If you go into a restaurant and they've got a lot of pictures, that's basically what you're doing in photography. You're forcing them to look at something that's square. Oh, I know it's that square. I know what to look inside that. I know what to look, and my eye will be drawn to whatever that image is in there. And very much between a frame within a frame, your eye will be drawn to that. So, well, that's a frame. I'll have a look, and it focuses on there. Providing you get the picture in the middle right, and it's not too dark, and it has interest. That's what you would want to go for. So there's all little techniques like that.
I suppose the people who want to do photo runs, are they like looking for Instagrammable routes, tourists? Like, who's the kind of market?
I went through the different avatars, as sometimes they call them. So there will be those who are coming to London as a general visitor who've seen the sites before and they want to do a bit more and explore it more. Feel more as though they're like a local rather than a tourist. They're more likely to stay at a hotel, and there'll be two types of those. I think there'll be almost like the person who's like the leader of the party, who will go out in the morning and do the route and run it just so they can see the way around it and try to find out, the different things that they want to go to see, and say, okay, well, this is open at 10, I'll be able to, that's what I want to do first, second and third. So they almost like are using the photo runs as a way to navigate or produce their own plan about what they want to do for the day, but they'd also be the leaders when they take the rest of the people out at a slower space, be able to pull it together. So they've got an agenda that they think they're going to have some success from. The second group of people, I think, will be more people who work in London, and I think there will be a number of people who will just use it as an ad hoc when they're there. It's a nice day today, let's go and do that. Or I've got to go to London with my in-laws. I want to try and explore this one because I know they're interested in this part of London and want to do some shopping. So it helps them to find things to do when they're there. I think there's also another group of people who, especially people who have arrived into London, either as students or as people from overseas or from outside the country, who are now going to have to use London as their base for a period. And they want to get more acclimatised to the city and make maximum use of the time when they're here. That's another use. And one area I want to try to investigate is whether businesses have a need to start to make people feel as if they belong not just to the company and the location, but the city themselves. So if they go out for a team building, they can use these to just as a team bonding to explore an area and then go out for a drink. But I think it's also just to get people talking about other things apart from what they do in work to make it more exciting. So the final group would be those who are fundraising or want to try to get fit because they're doing a race or London, and you need motivation to find your way around London. So I'm looking at ways of being able to use London or these set of routes to try to encourage people to find new ways to fundraise, and also just to train or to learn more about their city, so they can bring that canvas of the city as a vehicle to help them in their fundraising campaigns.